Hello everybody, my name is Patrick Walsh. Welcome to today's show. We have a good one for you as always. We are back today and leading off with a big new story. Clarence Thomas in financial disclosures has acknowledged yet another trip paid for by GOP megadonor and Hitler memorabilia collector enthusiast Harlan Crow. If you remember him, we'll give you all the details on that. And also a big follow-up on the story we talked about yesterday from City and State. I know with regards to Mondaire Jones, Jamal Bowman, that whole fiasco, some big kind of new, there's no other way to say it, but just drama between these two politicians got dropped that really does not make a particular party look very good at all. Also, we are following breaking news right now as we're recording this with regards to congestion pricing. It is apparently hanging by a thread as Hochul's alternative plans to recover the revenue that would have been, over $1 billion of revenue that would have been brought in by congestion pricing seems to fall apart again and again and again as key senators and House of Representatives members within the state of New York seem to really balk at the proposal. Meanwhile, a big new story. Israel says Hamas used weaponized rape. Does the evidence add up? And we'll tell you exactly what outlet that is in, and it is a pretty significant outlet in the UK. So we'll discuss the significance of that as we find out more and more about the Israel actions in Gaza and how they have really been justifying what they've been doing in Gaza. But first, we start with this. Justice Clarence Thomas has acknowledged on Friday additional luxury travel he accepted from a conservative billionaire, amending a previous financial disclosure to reflect trips he had taken to an Indonesian island and a secretive all-male club in the Northern California Redwoods. The trips taken in 2019, which is, again, like the laws on these things need to be so tighter, and we just do not have the biggest advocate of any sort of Supreme Court ethics in the United States Senate or just in Congress in general is Dick Durbin, whose activism essentially consists of sending a strongly worded letter like, oh, you need to really do better with your ethics. And the Supreme Court is just like, you know what? We actually don't. So you could just shut up. That's literally, it's not actually what they say, but it's essentially how they act. John Roberts, but we won't be dealing with this ethics case. But the trips, they were taken in 2019, and they were revealed again by ProPublica, and they were just more additional edits to something that, again, this already happened now, probably 5 years ago. It is kind of a joke that you can just add that back on, with the trips and Parliament. Like no other group of people, even though, for example, like the Fed chairs have recused themselves over less stuff than this. They have held themselves up to higher ethical standards than the members of the Supreme Court have, and they do have both incredible amounts of power and they're unelected. So just to put it in perspective, but there is no group in Washington that has ethical standards that are so wide open and have so much power. So it really is pretty incredible to watch. The trips taken in 2019 were revealed earlier by ProPublica, but it's the first time Justice Thomas is including them on his financial disclosures. Other Supreme Court justices chronicled their gifts, travel, and money earned from books and teaching. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson received 4 concert tickets valued at about $3,700 from Beyonce and $10,000 of artwork from a musician in Alabama named Lonnie Hawley. The financial disclosures released yearly are one of the few public records about the justices' lives, providing select details from their activities outside the court. A steady drumbeat of revelations about ties between some of the justices and wealthy donors have only intensified interest in the reports, particularly after Justice Thomas has accepted lavish gifts and travel from affluent friends over the decades. So this is probably one of the biggest, clear and open obstacles to reforming our democracy, to making it act more for the people, is the Supreme Court. Not only do they have the power that they have, but it is so unaccountable, and they're in there for life. And there is pretty much no ethical standard that they can bar, with any precedent and get kicked out of the court. Like once they're in there, and there's very little you can figure out with what they're doing. They don't have to disclose stuff. You know, when you're adding something in 2019 that happened in 2024 to your disclosure sheet, you essentially don't have to disclose any. Like he could have just not disclosed that, and he probably would have been absolutely fine. So like those standards. And for ethics, those standards of transparency, and again, it's not just that we need more transparency. We need actual regulations and restrictions to stop people from doing this stuff. Because even if there's a bunch of transparency, they'll still do it, and you'll just know about it, and you won't be able to stop it at all. Because that's what we've seen, you know, really through so many different parts of public life, you know, especially with regards to gift giving and stuff like that with PACs. And we know how much money is in our political system. We know the impact it's having, but we're essentially powerless to stop it because there's no actual truth to the regulations. We can figure out what's going on, but we can't do anything about it, which almost, you know, it's like we're not even living in blissful ignorance of what's being done to us anymore. But it's like we're under the anesthesia of lack of action, but we can still feel the pain of the scalpel that is just this unlimited money in politics. And it's the same thing with the Supreme Court. Like there is no real restriction on them, and they have so much power. It is a really scary thing, and it's definitely not in any way conducive to a healthy democracy. It is, yeah, wow. It is really, really surprising and clear to see. And it really helps. I think the Harlan Crow story, the Roe v. Wade situation has really helped wake people up to the obstacle that the Supreme Court poses in terms of having any functional semblance of democracy. So I think that is a very, very important issue. Some of the other people who got some stuff, books are one of the ways that justices can earn outside uncapped money. One of the few ways justices can earn outside uncapped money. Justice Jackson reported $893,750 from an advance from her coming book, a memoir. Justice Gorsuch listed a book advance of $250,000. Justice Brett Kavanaugh disclosed a $340,000 advance. He is still working on a legal memoir, Untitled, and is expected to offer a first-hand account of his contentious confirmation hearing in 2018 and on his life in 2022. An attempt on his life in 2022. I didn't realize someone tried to kill him in 2022. The deal was earlier reported by Axios. And Sonia Sotomayor continues to earn trips from the book, earn money from the book. And she also narrates a show from PBS about a Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx and her family called Alma's Way, which is interesting. Probably like the least nefarious thing on this list for sure. So pretty cute stuff there from Sonia Sotomayor, who definitely should retire. But it is, again, really, really apparent that this is such a big threat to our democracy. So many, it's a way to essentially buy off these people, and they're some of the most powerful people in the world with no recourse, no action to stop them or rein them in any functional way, and they just essentially continue exactly with what they are doing. So it is a pretty bad situation to be sure. Okay, so here's something I would genuinely never thought I would say. Sean Patrick Maloney is completely vindicated in my mind. So really remarkable story in City and State here. I just want to get into it. It's by Timmy Fashola. For the last 2 years in New York politics, Mondaire Jones has been understood as the spurned ex-congressman caught in the blast radius of former Representative Sean Patrick Maloney's ego. And I'm going to add some kind of analysis at the end here, but I just really want to get into this because it's an incredible story. As the story goes, Maloney, then the chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which is the group that essentially funds all of the Democratic House races, decided that he would rather run in a district represented by Jones than his own, forcing the young black congressman into a dilemma. He could either stand his ground and fight an expensive primary against one of the most powerful members of his own party, or launch a primary challenge against Representative Jamal Bowman, a fellow progressive black congressman who represented the neighboring 16th congressional district. So he had Jamal Bowman to his south, Mondaire Jones did, and Sean Patrick Maloney to his north. And then when Sean Patrick Maloney got squeezed out of his district, essentially the story goes, the way it was understood is that Sean Patrick Maloney just drops down, kicks Mondaire Jones, poor Mondaire Jones out, and he loses. And he's essentially forced to move to Brooklyn and run for an open seat in the 10th congressional district, since he on principle refused to challenge Bowman. and Maloney insisted on running on the New York 17th district. But sources with direct knowledge of Jones' campaign's inner workings told City and State that this narrative is essentially false. In May 2022, Progressive blasted Maloney for forcing Jones out of New York 17. Maloney contacted Jones and offered to pull out of the New York 17 race, only for Jones to turn him down because he preferred to run in a different district. And far from being reluctant to challenge Bowman, Jones was eager to primary his neighbor, at least until internal polls showed that he had no hope of defeating him. Because, if you want a progressive black representative, I'm sorry, you can do no better than Jamal Bowman. And I think, the conduct of Mondaire Jones has made that perfectly clear that Jamal Bowman is 100 times more integrity, has 100 more times belief in his progressive values, and hopefully will be able to win on June 25th. On May 16, 2022, just 25 minutes after new congressional maps were released, Maloney announced that he planned to run in the newly redrawn 17th congressional district rather than the 18th congressional district that he then represented, since his current hometown of Cold Springs had been drawn into New York 17. Sean Patrick Maloney didn't even give me a heads up before he went on Twitter to make the announcement. I think that tells you everything you need to know about Sean Patrick Maloney, Jones told Politico shortly after his announcement. Progressives were livid, seeing Maloney's decision as an attempt to Bigfoot Jones, a young black progressive serving his first term in Congress, out of a seat. Representative AOC called on Maloney to resign his position as chair of the DCCC, calling the move particularly shameful as a member of Democratic leadership. Maloney did not respond to requests for comment. He's out in, I believe, in Paris as the ambassador for the OECD, so essentially a sinecure job. But the truth, according to former senior staffer on Jones' campaign, was Jones did not want to run in New York 17, which were being drawn to be significantly less friendly to Democrats, as we can see when Sean Patrick Maloney fell flat on his ass and lost the seat in November. The broader grassroots coalition was intent that he run in 17, and he probably would have run, but he did not entertain, according to former senior staffer on Jones' campaign, he did not entertain running in 17. The former staffer said Jones did not respond to multiple requests for comment. When the new congressional districts were finalized on May the 20th, 2022, Maloney reached out to Jones to discuss the primary. During the conversation, the existence of which has never been previously reported, Maloney offered to pull out of the New York 17 race so that Jones could continue representing the district, according to the former Jones senior staffer and a second person familiar with the conversation. Jones declined Maloney's offer. So Maloney essentially came in and said, I've done my time. I'm probably going to get a great job. And he was right, no matter if I win or if I lose, because he went on to fall flat on his ass and get a great job. So that, that essentially proves his point. And it's like, I don't need this. If people are going to get really, really mad at me, you can just have the seat, go for it. And Jones is like, no, I'm actually more focused on the 16th district. He wanted to run, Jones did, against Bowman, according to senior staffers, and even took steps to test the waters for a potential primary challenge. Campaign finance records show that Jones paid $25,000 to the polling firm EMC Research during the time period, and that he reported the expenditure on the 27th of May, 2022. The payment was related to a poll that the Jones campaign commissioned in New York 16th, testing a hypothetical matchup between himself and Bowman, according to 3 people familiar with the poll. So he's turning down that offer after causing all this big stink, doing all these dramatic quotes to Politico about, this tells you everything you need to know about Sean Patrick Maloney, who just, a few weeks later called and offered Jones the seat back because he's like, I don't need this. But Jones is like, no, I'm coming for a guy who I just called an ally, maybe a year or so ago publicly and have cozied up to in a big way. I'm going to try and go for Jamal Bowman. But that did not go so well. He was intent on running in 16, so we decided to pull in 16 and find out just how disastrous a decision that would be. The bull came back. Obviously, it was a sufficiently high hurdle to clear that Mondaire did not feel he could do it in the 90 days we had. Former staffer said, adding that the results of the poll showed about a 35-point spread, with support for Bowman above 50 and Jones around 20%. Bowman later got wind of the poll. Imagine that, you think someone's your friend and they're polling to run against you. But that Bowman Mafia standing strong, but Jones denied it. But he clearly would have been blown out of the water by Bowman had he done that. So he stopped And rather than launch a doom challenge against Bowman or risk a tough general election fight in New York 17, Jones ultimately decided to move to Brooklyn and run the crowded congressional field, which eventually split the vote with between Eli New, City Council member Colina Rivera, and himself, where Dan Goldman, who is not a progressive, won the seat. With Jones off in Brooklyn, Maloney won the Democratic nomination in New York 17, but lost the general election to Rep. Mike Lawler on November 9th. Once Maloney's race was called in favor of Lawler, Jones went on Twitter to rub it in, tweeting, "Yikes." So, again, what a unlikable person. Like, this is a seat that he could probably won. He was very popular with activists in the district at that time. He could have absolutely won that seat. And what type of politician are you if you're going to run from a Biden plus 10 district for a tough general election fight? It was literally a Biden plus 10 district. I can't even understand that. Like, you have aspirations of being a serious politician, but you see a deep, deep blue district in a general election fight, and you are afraid of that? Like, what a joke. Like, get out of here. Like, he should not, honestly, I may just vote for Michael Lawler again because I do not want that guy in Congress. Like, what a joke. So, yeah. Now, essentially, the U.S. ambassador, now Maloney has a cushy big gig as the U.S. ambassador for the OECD. Jones has moved back to the suburbs and once again is running to represent New York 17. He's rebranded himself as pragmatic instead of progressive in hopes of winning enough suburban seats to support to unseat Lawler. And if he thinks this is a tough enough general election fight, he may just drop out because he's too scared of anything that's not like a 15-point Biden margin. Again, he had a 10-point Biden margin had he stood in that seat, and he just was like, oh, no, it's too tough. I'd rather just challenge Jamal Bowman. Like, that shows you a lot about who that guy is, in my opinion. Republican congressman has attempted to paint himself Jones is a close ally of Bowman, that's Michael Lawler in the 17th, who himself faces a strong primary challenge from Westchester County Executive George Latimer. When Jones was asked a year ago whether he would endorse Bowman, he gave an evasive answer. As Jamal Bowman has shown time and time again, he does not need my endorsement to defeat his primary opponents, Jones wrote in a text message at the time. The suggestion that he does is offensive. Talk about protesting too much. On Tuesday, Jones took his strongest step yet to distance himself from Bowman, endorsing Latimer and harshly criticizing Bowman, who had been an outspoken critic of Israel's war in Gaza, for sowing pain and anxiety among Jewish New Yorkers. What an absolute scumbag. That is all I have to say about that. Wow. And my deep apologies to Sean Patrick Maloney, who got called right after, offered to see back, and Jones was like, no, I'm coming for Jamal Bowman. Well, he finally has, and it has cost him a lot. Not Jamal Bowman, but support for Mondaire Jones has gone down in his own race with, the Working Families Party and the Progressive PAC backing out in support of him. So, really interesting news coming out of New York Focus, and this is also from Bernadette Hogan reporting this. Sources are saying, here she's from New York One, sources are saying legislature will not act on any short-term MTA funding plan before they leave town. They say they can deal with it at a later date. Other thing up for grabs, a deal to give yeshivas a separate lane to meet substantial equivalency regulations with the State Education Department. But the key part of that tweet there from Bernadette Hogan, State House correspondent in New York One, they will not act before they leave town, the state legislature, on a alternate MTA funding plan. So that puts, of course, more pressure on congestion pricing, which has been a pretty big low for Kathy Hochul. She made the announcement just before noon on Wednesday. It was pre-taped, an initial sign she was planning to avoid the tough questions from the press, and I think we can give you that, but it's not really, actually, it's pointless, but she made the announcement just before noon on Wednesday. It was a pre-taped announcement upending a program 5 years in the making she had repeatedly praised, calling it Better Way Forward just 2 weeks ago during a speech in Dublin, and whose delay or demise leaves a multi-billion-dollar hole in the budget of the MTA. On Wednesday, Hochul said that implementing the program's $15 fee to enter downtown Manhattan would undercut New York's economic recovery from the pandemic and discourage workers from returning to their offices. Less than 2% of commuters, by the way, to downtown Manhattan would pay the fee if the program is implemented, according to the Tri-State Transportation Campaign. And again, this is why you have the congestion pricing in place. It's because if you don't want to drive the car, there's other alternatives called taking the train, and that is why the congestion charge works so well. And there's tons and tons of major upgrades being all done from all parts of the New York City tri-state area transportation network, from Westchester to Long Island and New Jersey to within the city, on the subways, in the outer boroughs, everywhere. The governor's social media feeds have gone silent on the topic too, and her team has published no details on her plan to replace the billions of dollars of lost MTA revenue, which have funded the stations, improved disabled access, and updated outdated signaling systems that cause delays. Hochul's press secretary, Avi Small, did not respond to questions about when the governor would next appear in the public or take questions. She gave her public reasons for why she made the decision. I don't think it's good messaging to go out there and explain yourself over and over again. You just keep it in the news, said Albany political consultant Morgan Hook, which is probably a good idea, if you're going to stick through it. But you got to come out with some sort of alternative plan. So the Tracking Association of New York, quoted in the second press release, is currently suing to overturn the program entirely, according to Politico. So in the governor's absence, Albany's press corps has tried to wheedle the details out of legislatures about how governor plans to fill the budget hole that has been opened up. It's been difficult because lawmakers themselves are only receiving limited information from Hochul's office. Asked Thursday about the plan that Hochul's office presented to the legislature, the pretty left-wing guys, Deputy Senate Majority Leader Mike Gianaris, said that he and his colleagues are trying to figure out the very vague detail that was presented to us. There's something that's not very specific that we have before us. There are concepts, he told NY1's Bernadette Hogan about the governor's proposal to raise $1 billion for the MTA from unspecified sources. So this is essentially how it sounded as she announced the plan and how she justified it. Kathy Hochul.
So let's talk about congestion pricing, which would impose a $15 charge on cars entering Midtown and below, beginning in just a few weeks. Now, it was enacted 5 years ago to achieve two essential goals: reduce traffic and emissions in New York City and provide a funding stream for much-needed capital investments in public transit. It was also enacted in a pre-pandemic period. Circumstances have changed, and we must respond to the facts on the ground, not from the rhetoric from 5 years ago. So after careful...
But again, from 2 weeks ago, when she literally supported the plan. And again, I think that using the pandemic is just such a BS excuse. Like, nobody is going to say, the pandemic played a role. Even if you're the biggest congestion pricing hater, just say, I think it's bad for our business. Like, I don't want to have to pay the goddamn money when I go in there. Like, that is what's going on. And just absolutely nobody buys this stuff. And some of the revolt I've seen around, from New York area politicians has been a very, very big deal. But even if you're listening to this from outside the country or outside the state of New York, which I'm sure, 99% of people are, it is worth paying attention to because it is such a big indicator for transit in the United States. Where New York goes, a lot of people will follow. It is a very, very kind of important sign and step in the right direction for, just making serious investments in transit. New York City's transit is already probably one of the most developed transit, systems in the United States. And it's still very rundown, still very decrepit. If they are comfortable taking that much, investment in terms of a place that is so congested normally, and making that setup, really almost that much better, I think it could be a very, very powerful thing. It could be a very powerful endorsement for other cities. If you have a kind of middling transportation network in your city and they see how New York is able to do it, that could start momentum for other people in other cities to start pushing for it. And it really, for it to get through, though, it has to get through New York first. A vote was reportedly supposed to take place on a plan to raise $1 billion from unspecified sources, but it was postponed after it became apparent the scheme did not have sufficient support of the legislature. As of Friday morning, it was unclear what might replace it. So it seems like this plan is on the ropes due to some pretty strong reaction and an inability for Mrs. Traffic, or for Mrs. Car lobbied governor, governor bought by essentially the car dealerships, as we talked about on the last show, and the road lobby. I'm not making it up. Go back and listen to the last episode. We'll give you all or I think it was 2 episodes ago. We'll give you kind of all the details on that. But 2 episodes ago. But she didn't have the foresight to come in and plan and say, this is actually the way we should do it. It is not someone who is a very smart politician. If you're going to make such a drastic change in the situation, at least have a plan for how you're going to manage it. And it seems like that lack of a plan very well may be her demise. Okay, so some pretty surprising news today out of, London, because they have this story out in the Times of London today. Israel says Hamas weaponized rape. Does the evidence add up? The Israeli government insists Hamas formally sanctioned sexual assault on October 7, 2023, but investigators say the evidence does not stand up to scrutiny. Catherine Phillip and Gabriel Weniger report on 8 months of claim and counterclaim. So this is a pretty big deal. Over the past 5 months, it had been 5 months, they say, since October 7th attacks, and the ensuing conflict in Gaza was raging as the war was the seemingly irreconcilable war of narratives that characterized the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for the past 8 decades. Perhaps nothing arising from that day had been more contentious than Israel's assertion that Hamas had not only burned and slaughtered its way through Israeli communities along the Gaza border, killing 1,200 and taking more than 200 hostages, but that it planned and carried out a campaign of mass and systematic rape as a weapon of war. Patton is the UN Secretary General's special representative, Pramila Patton, for sexual assault done during wartime, knew what she was walking into. Her fact-finding mission to Israel came amid a furious row over whether such allegations should be accepted as fact, and accusations that anyone failing to do so was guilty of anti-Semitic bias against Jewish women. Remember the whole Me Too unless you're a Jew stuff from maybe 2, 3, 4 months ago. What would make the effort over October 7th harder still were the examples of false and misleading information from senior political figures in government-linked civil service to those in police and security services tasked with the official investigation. I don't know, maybe people like Zaka, for example, that was really trotted out by the Israeli government as a key source of facts that turned out to be incredibly, incredibly dishonest. Lost in all of this were the victims themselves, none of whom are definitively known to have survived. The only woman yet to testify about her own sexual abuse is Israeli hostage Amit Susana, who spoke to foreign media about how she was forced to strip and commit a sexual act on her male captor at gunpoint during 6 weeks in captivity in Gaza. Those familiar with Susana said she decided to speak out to help other hostages about abuse. They hoped it might help those still being held captive who may be suffering sexual abuse. Specific survivors, the only reason they told their story was because they wanted some sort of political pressure on the Israeli government to work harder to release the hostages, said Sarai Aroni, the academic at Ben-Gurion University, who's helping compile a historical archive of the events that will be closed for 50 years. And that is a horrible decision to have to make. That is for sure. It is, a really, dark and historical situation for, the people of Israel within their kind of historical psyche and the just general, very intense, the very, very intense history of pogroms, and a lot of rapes have been part of those pogroms. But, throughout this piece, we are seeing, from Zaka, we're seeing pictures of Zaka here, and the really debunking that they have gone through over time, the pretty strong debunking they have gone through over time. And I think the biggest takeaway here is this is the first sign of actual, official, legitimate, I hate to say legitimate because, these outlets have been right all the time. You got The Intercept. You got Electronic Intifada really, really leading the way. You got even some Twitter accounts that have been digging through this. And they have found out, I think it was the gray zone. When most people in Washington hear the name the gray zone, I feel like a chill goes down their spine. These are the real Russian, Chinese, Iranian influence ops. And they're reporting stuff that is confirmed by one of the biggest newspapers in the entire world, but it only takes a few more months for them to get through it. It is really just the act of finding what is clearly in front of your face, talking to people about it, translating certain things from Hebrew to English, following up, asking, just, doing basic journal. You don't have to have, the most insane sources ever, but, this is something that they reported first, detail by detail, little by little over time, and it has really come out pretty systematically, pretty clearly that they have been utterly vindicated. I think some of the sources maybe like went a little bit too maximalist on just about any sort of claims with regards to sexual assault, but I think The Intercept, for example, Electronic and Final also, they did a very, very good job in terms of highlighting just some of the blatant things that just did not add up. And here, what do we see? They are backed up, they're confirmed, they are supported in the Times of London just 4 or 5 months out of the fact, and countless Palestinian bodies later. With that being said, it is all we have for you today. We are back on Monday.